I went through this conversion therapy process for about 2 years.
And kind of digging in a little bit, what did that look like?
The conversion therapy was the idea that they could change your sexual orientation or gender identity through spiritual or psychological processes. And so I went to therapy one-on-one with a person from LDS Family Services. And there they kind of deconstructed my family associations. It was kind of like, well, maybe your dad wasn't there for you and your mom was overbearing. And I'm like, no, my dad was like scoutmaster. My mom wanted us to beat up each other in the backyard and come in for dinner. So it really wasn't.
There was the masculine and the feminine were both present in a healthy way.
There's none of this weird overlap. So like gender roles were very strong, and I got it. So we were just talking about my spirituality then, and praying and reading scriptures and going to church and getting involved. And I was really involved in high school and college, and just trying to like throw myself into everything that I possibly could to be the best at everything I possibly could to cover this part of me that was awful. And so I was going to this group therapy at the same time, and it was awesome for a little bit. It was...
Did it help you feel like you had community, like people that understood you?
I didn't feel as alone.
Yeah.
And that is huge. But after a certain point, it got toxic, and it was absolutely counterproductive to what the goal was. So my bishop said, well, here's this group therapy you can go to, and you should go to the one done by BYU because there's more guys your age. Looking back, that was a bad idea.
You guys all start dating each other?
Yes. It's like, if you really knew what was going on down there, you would be sending me to the lesbian geriatric chapter at the University of Utah. But
you finally tell who's gay and who's not, right? You can actually.
So, I mean, and at these therapy groups, again, it was great. I'm not alone in this boat. But the problem is when the boat's sinking, you don't all want to be in the same boat. You need someone else from another point of view or something with another boat to come get
somebody
you.
That's not in the middle of the crisis.
Right.
I got to tell you this. I used to do a stand-up comedy down in Provo and UVU, and one of my greatest jokes, this was the joke I came up with, and I said, this kind of has to do with that a little bit, but I said, when I got down here to Provo, they said I needed to take an institute class, and so I went to 3 or 4 classes, but didn't find any attractive girls. And then I went to a class, and it was like the perfect class. I knew I'd find all the hot chicks there. It was called Miracle Forgiveness Class. Those chicks are putting out. And that was my joke, and it killed every time. And but it just kind of reminded me of, me and my buddies would always joke around. If you want to find the girls putting out, go hang out outside the bishop's door.
That's true. Oh.
Anyway, those are a couple of my old stand-up jokes. But sorry, go on.
Well played. And so we're all in the same boat. Didn't feel so alone anymore. But then it got to the point where guys are starting to pair off, and then I'm kind of seeing what's happening behind the scenes when everybody's not at the therapy, and there's shenanigans going on that you're not supposed to do while you're attending this group therapy. And then I met married men that had kids, lots of them. And they weren't happy. I mean, they said they were.
Well, how could you be?
But they were there because they still had this urge to make out with their elders quorum president who was on the DL. They were still going to rest stops down by Spanish Fort Canyon and hooking up randomly, which is like, and then they said, well, my therapist and my bishop are okay, just as long as I limit it to a couple of times a month because, it's part of my sex addiction. And then, as long as I'm going to therapy, it's part of my process in healing. It's part of my disorder. And right away I started thinking, whoa, like
there's a lot of language there about feeling broken, right? Or you need fixing or whatever.
Like, so your bishop and your therapist are okay with you hooking up randomly with strangers, But then they're not okay if you actually find a stable relationship that isn't illegal or a risk to your family. That's really effed up. And I'm thinking this can't be the case. But there were multiple guys in that situation. And it was almost the same dialogue, just different situations.
Sure.
And I thought, this is weird. And then my one-on-one therapist, and I was dating this girl at the time named Suzanne, and she's like, you should probably tell her what's going on. And I said, okay. So I came out to her. And he's like, well, but tell her that you have same sex attraction or same gender attraction, not that you're gay. I'm like, okay. So I sit her down, and it's almost like I'm telling her that I have an STD or something. Like, Sue, we have to talk about something. And right away I said, I've been seeing this counselor, and she's like, oh, you mean for like SSA? Oh yeah. We talked about that in Young Women's. I'm totally fine with that. In fact, I'll help you. And just let me know what to do. And I'm just like, whoa, all right, here we go.
You were ready to.
And she was super hot too. Like, yeah. And so that was progress, right? My bishop was like, yes, that's great. But as weeks went by and months went by, nothing was changing though for the feelings. It was just kept pushing them down. All these kind of reactive, I was going to the gym a ton, and I thought I had kind of pseudo gym crushes on these guys, but I didn't know what to do with them. And my therapist was like, oh, it's because you just didn't have the male bonding that you needed growing up, so go be pals with them and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how that would be ethical, in the sense that if you're straight and you're attracted to these women and you're trying not to be, the last thing you want to do is go hang out with a bunch of them you think that are hot at the gym. And so it didn't make sense to me, but it was like, well, but this is the program. This is what was in the box that the bishop gave me, and I'm not supposed to look outside of it, read outside of it, or anything like that.
Were you studying pretty actively, trying to get the information in?
Yeah.
Were you ever involved? I know that Down H. Oaks got in some trouble when he was president of BYU. They did some of the electroshock therapy, conversion therapy. Did you ever have to deal with anything like that?
No, there were guys in my therapy group that had. At the time, over time, my therapist decided, let me go back a little bit, but they kind of got to a phase where everybody that I was in that group with, almost every single person was doped up on some kind of heavy medication.
Oh, really?
So they had kind of moved from the electric chair to
medicines.
Meds.
Got it.
Let's medicate the hell out of this so they don't feel anything. Their anxiety is from the SSA. Their anxiety or depression is from being attracted to men. So if we can squash the attraction and the anxiety, then they'll be able to date women, was the idea. And so I ran with that. I was on some meds, and then still nothing was changing. And so they had a discussion at the group therapy about trauma, childhood trauma and stuff, because my family dynamics were fine. And none of the other answers kind of made sense. And my therapist was like, we need to really talk about this, because you were likely molested as a child and you just don't remember. And I was like, dude, no, sorry, that's not the answer. And he's like, well, isn't it? Have you thought about that? And I'm like, well, some guys at the therapy group have talked about it, and it's unfortunately prevalent, but not me. I don't remember. It's not in my childhood. And he's like, well, I think it was so traumatic and so repetitive that your brain has blocked it out. So for the next few months, we're going to start dissecting your childhood memories to find out when this happened. And again, it was inside this box. And I was like, all right, let's try this. And then bought into it, thought, yep, this happened on the way home from piano lessons, when I was walking home, and he said, do you remember walking past a house that scared you and you'd run past it as fast as you could? At 7 years old.
Sure.
I'm like, oh my God, yes, I totally remember that. I remember where that house was. He's like, see, why were you running past it? Well, because it scared me. Yeah, okay. So let's start digging more into that. Mm-hmm. And so it was just this piecing together random memories and trying to build this narrative that satisfied this psychological idea that they had bound by church social science that molested kids end up gay. So suddenly I was put into that boat and they ran with it. And then I was told by my bishop to come out to my family, not that I was gay, not that I had same-sex attraction disorder, but that I had been molested. And so I did. And my dad got pretty upset and felt really guilty. I told some extended family, and they kind of went on this pseudo witch hunt to try to figure out who could have done this. And thinking back, it's like, well, thank God they didn't find who they thought could have done this, because it didn't happen.
Well, and that's so hard for a parent, right, to hear something like that, because your biggest fears are coming true in that moment. Like, oh, I didn't protect my child from this thing. And so of course he would, your father would be very upset. So have you been able to talk to them? Obviously it's been a long time, but like, were you able to eventually let them know, like, hey, actually I wasn't molested?
Yes. So I told my dad and extended members of my family, except my mom. At some point, my dad told my mom, and I had a conversation with her, and she was pretty upset. And she's like, and she's no longer a member. But she said, you know what? I was the perfect housewife, the best I could have ever been, home all the time, homemaker, 500% of the time, was there for you on your way to school, home from school. I was there after piano lessons. You never came back like an hour and a half, 2 hours late. Your behavior never changed. You were a typical hyperactive 80s kid. Like, I don't believe this. So you need to figure your shit out. You need to tell me what's really going on. And until you're ready to face that, I don't know what to do, but I want to help you. And I want you to realize that you're not broken.
That's a great parenting.
And that always sat in the back of my mind as I went through all of these therapies and stuff. And we can get a little bit more into it later, because conversion therapy is now illegal for minors in Utah. And I was part of that process.
Is in any form. So like, I know in Utah, it's now illegal, right? Is what you were going through illegal now?
No, just for minors.
Just for minors.
Yes.
Got it. Because you weren't a minor, it's still illegal.
And that's why some people are like, well, you weren't forced and you weren't a minor. I'm like, well, but I was at my wit's end with my spiritual leader. And I mean, it's what, either do this therapy, marry a woman, have kids, or spiritually die and never see your family again.